Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the series of talks in conversation with. Thank you for joining us. And today I will talk to Perel. Perel is an artist from New York who in the last couple of years develops the work between Berlin and New York, and also present their work internationally. Yes, hello, Perel, you can hear me? It works well? Yes, cool.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome.
Hi.
Hi. And now when I said this, that you present your work in the last years in different contexts, internationally, in the context of contemporary dance and performance, it is also brings me back to the fact that a little bit more than a month ago, we were supposed to meet in Novi Sad in Serbia. Exactly in a context of presenting your work, performance pain threshold. And then I'm in Berlin at the moment, you are in New York. And this idea to present your performance in Novi Sad is at the moment postponed because of the situation that we are all in. And it is something that will happen because to me and all of my colleagues in Per.Art in Novi Sad, this is something that we were really excited to host you and to welcome you in our context, in the context of local contemporary dance and performance and disability arts scene in Novi Sad. But you remember how that day, today I was thinking, because it was, you were on the way to Novi Sad, literally you were at the airport in Stockholm. And then we...
Yes, I was...
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I just remember because I'm bringing this up because it shifted so quickly the situation from planning to welcome you to the point that you were really at the airport when we received the news that the flights from European Union are stopped, and because you were supposed to go back to New York after Novi Sad, and then also in Serbia, we got the first news that public gatherings should be reduced, and then from day to next day, it was not about reducing the number of people gathering in public, but actually canceling. So it really, in like one day, our plans changed. And for me, why I'm bringing this up is because also of this, like how fast everything goes out of the order that we somehow get used to, or accept that this is the way how we function, or this is the way how we manage in this order, and then everything goes off. And I mean, in that moment for us, it was the most important to take care of you, because you were on the way, like you were not at your home, you were not in the environment where you live and work. And for us, it was important to really take care that we get you to the safe place, and then to see how we can meet, exchange. And one of the ways is also this moment now that we talk and share with other colleagues.
Yes.
But tell me, I would like, for people who are listening to us, this is for me important to not to talk about the performance pain threshold, but for me it's actually interesting to see how you approach the audience, and how you think of public, and how you actually experiment also with the performance format in your work. And in this regard, if you can speak a little bit about your practice and your approach, especially in relation to the embodied experience that you have as a disabled queer artist, and how you invest this exactly in thinking how to communicate with audiences, and also how to think of a different formats for the performance practice that you develop.
Well, before I go into my work, I did want to just mention that I think what you're doing right now and having the series is wonderful as a way to shift, I don't know, I want to say the enterprise of making into this format now. And when we were trying to figure out what the future would look like, when we both were realizing how critical this time was becoming.
Yes.
Yeah, that we both, I remember a moment of having a WhatsApp chat with you.
Yes.
Where we both just sort of paused and it was like we both were kind of looking into the unknown. Exactly. In this time.
Exactly.
But I feel like you had just such a beautiful, very quick turnaround of like what you can contribute and create in this time. And this is the first
in this moment.
Say it again.
It exactly came from this WhatsApp conversation that we had that you are mentioning, because I didn't have this as a plan, but because of two of us dealing with that moment, that with this what happened that I just described, there was something that both you and we felt disturbed or shaken and by this situation, that exactly something about getting out of the planned thing that we had, or the order that we kind of were used to, made me think, okay, we had this conversation, and this conversation really opened how you described, like this place of us reflecting what is it that we can do in this moment, and how we can keep in contact and reflecting on or even more like contributing to this idea of feeding more the culture of solidarity, and not being cut off because the usual way of meeting or usual way of encountering and moving, traveling, and physically being present in the same space should stop us, or should frighten us and leave us exactly inhibited in front of this that you are describing as the unknown.
Yeah.
But this unknown that you are bringing up is again bringing me back to you and your practice. And exactly this, what I was asking, what I'm curious to hear from you is, you also deal with actually the unknown, and you take this risk by trying to develop these different formats and this different way of communicating with the audiences that you encounter through your performance. And this unknown and this risk is something that is really inspiring to me, but also I think very important, and not only artistically but also politically relevant to bring it up. And I would like to hear a little bit if you can speak about it.
Yeah. I'll be very honest now. I mean, this is the first public talk I'm having, or publicness that I'm having. in this moment, which makes sense that it's with you, because it would have been.
Yes.
But it's definitely, I can say, I have been going through a period of mourning, not being able to do the show in Novi Sad because of the way that I work with people in my work, and the ways that I use my access needs, or I could even say the space of vulnerability that my needs create, the way I use that as material in performance. It's something that as far as I know right now, needs to happen live in person with people.
Yes.
And even though I'm giving of my body in a very exposing way, and then when I have conversations with the audience about consent and their ideas of what that means, that's a very exposing place for everybody, and can become very scary or volatile, or nurturing or funny, depending on who I'm speaking with. But the risk that's there can only happen, as far as I know now, when I'm in a physical encounter with that person, and when they are facing my body and identity. So it's interesting, this social distancing in order to reduce risk, actual risk, and stay safe in our bodies, and not to jeopardize the health of others. That's the most important thing now. And it's also in my work relies on the opposite in order for it to happen.
Yeah.
However, I guess I could say something that's important to me is what we can maybe learn from this moment of vulnerability that the whole world is experiencing right now. And I wonder if I do the show in Novi Sad again, say in the future, or when I do the show again in general, if the response will be extremely different than what it's been now.
And when you say what we can learn in this situation, and also in relation to the state of vulnerability, how can we learn? Because also we are often, based on our experience, how we learn, there is always, or not always, but the dominant model is that there is someone who knows and is supposed to teach us, or that's how it is, like in schools or in education in general. Often in our field is the same, like there are authorities, or there are those who set the standards. So for me now, when I listen to you, I'm curious, how do you see this learning can happen, and it is not how to say, like how can also we shift these powers, or how can we look for other way of learning that from this state of vulnerability, and also in relation to how you develop your practice, how do you see this learning?
Yeah, I just need to say that there's a thunderstorm that just started when we started our interview.
Okay.
There hasn't been a thunderstorm this entire month that I've been in New York now, but now there's one, which I think is magic. I think it's a good sign.
Yeah.
You know, you and I discussed this when we last talked, and it's hard for me to wrap my mind around it, to reframe the problematic issues around talking about a practice born out of the embodied experience of disability, and what it has to teach everyone right now. Oh my gosh, now it's really pouring rain. Wow. Because I'm closing my eyes to listen to myself as I speak. Because I believe that right now the world actually needs the visibility of disabled art making to understand the subjectivity of vulnerability and loss that is very much a part of most of our experiences as disabled people, except that even within that idea, I don't want to reduce anyone's experience. So I think that, but I don't want to reduce what this moment means for everyone individually in their lives and their livelihood, and how everybody copes with this moment. You know, that's a personal thing. And as well, the experience of vulnerability and disability is not a universal at all. But you know, I think it, like in Pain Threshold, I'm deeply trying to show that these aspects of my identity that are normally perceived as needing help, being weak, maybe being less than as a disabled person, or in my gender and sexuality. I'm trying to take all of those preconceptions and projections and turn them over to show that these aspects of my identity are actually aspects of power and places of power. And in doing that, I'm centering myself and others like me, and I'm decentering a dominant idea of what is thought of as strength or power. And normally in my shows, I can see I'm changing people as I'm doing the show. I never know if when people leave the show, they are changed and that lasts, or it's like a moment of disruption of their worldview, and then they return to how they were before. But I feel like now, more than ever, when I think of my work and what I do, I think these things I'm trying to turn over and change, I really want that change to last beyond the show.
Yes, I think this exactly to create, and of course you are talking about it in the artistic practice and context, but to create this state where vulnerability is not perceived as victimhood, state of victimhood, but that, and this is what I think as artists we can do, and that's I think where I see also the power of artistic practice, to create these states where everyone who is involved and witnessing this experience also doesn't fall into being scared to give up on their position that they would identify as more powerful or more safe, and not let go into a state that would be the state of vulnerability that you are describing, where the change can happen. And this, whether it happens or not, or how long it stays with the spectators or participants who experience this, is, I think, important question for us as performance makers to think about. But I would always advocate for not having this as a criteria to how to say, like, to assess or even dismiss a certain practice based on like the effect that this experience brings, because these are moments, and if we repeat them or if we join them through different practices and experiences, they can then, in my opinion, be very important and powerful, because they are usually perceived as like alternative models or politics, but that in situations like this one, they then show not only that it's necessary to be ready to offer this experience and to then empower. I mean, I'm using this word in English. I don't know if it's if there is another one that we can escape the usage of power, but you know what I mean, like to empower us exactly in this direction, and then not only necessary, but then in the broader context that you are also desiring, like how it can affect a broader context, that hopefully it reaches the point when we realize that it's also inevitable, that this is the way that we should be with each other, or take care of each other, or act from that place towards the other individual, the other subject. It just makes me think now when I listen what you're saying, and also knowing about what you refer to in a very concrete case of pain threshold performance. And then it makes me think of other practices and other artists and initiatives who do think of these states, and then how this can bring it further than this one artistic experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for some reason, listening to what you're saying now, I do want to talk about care work right now.
Yeah, please.
Because, for instance, and actually this is backtracking a bit to a question you asked earlier. I just sort of want to flesh out some dimensionality around this from the standpoint of disability right now. And then we could return to how we could get at an articulation of collectivization, you know, which I know you want to talk about. But like for me, in all of my work, I am approaching the audience and collaborators from the sense of care. And like I have used in pain threshold specifically, because I direct somebody to massage my scar and my hip, that it's a choreography of care. But a choreography of care is something that disabled people are doing all the time. And so for me, it's not necessarily a risk to ask for that care from the audience, because it's something I know that I actually need in my life and I receive in my life from others. It's more of a risk for whomever agrees to touch me and massage me, because they have to face the unknown of my body. And they perceive that it puts them in a place of power, because it looks from the outside or on the surface, it looks like they're the ones who are caring for me, so they have the power. But because I'm the one who's asking and I know what I need and I'm telling them what that is, I'm in the place of power. And I'm teaching them how to be of service with their ability. And this is something that can go in a lot of directions right now, this concept. And there are a few ways I think about that, you know. I think about that in terms of class right now. And I think about that in terms of what kinds of people need to continue to work right now to take care of us. And how do we take care of them? And for me, in my household in New York, I am with two extremely close friends who are like my family and who care for me. And if I do need touch or assistance, can provide that. So I'm not running a risk of having to rely on somebody to come to be of service. But then there are plenty of people right now who need aid workers to come and help them. And that is an extreme risk for both of them. But it's necessary in order to do the daily things of life. So there's this one idea, I guess maybe it's kind of like I want to stretch out everyone's ideas of autonomy and safety and really look at the scope of interdependence that we all are facing, and who is putting themselves at risk right now in order for the rest of us to survive. And then in disability, it's like right now, the risk is mutual in a way, because you can never you can never surrender your reliance on others. You must constantly surrender yourself in that reliance, but you can never give it up. And right now, it's interesting to me that people are maybe not fully understanding their own reliance on structures around them in order to survive, because everything that we eat and buy and get, and these are coming from people who are bringing them to us, and at their own risk. Yeah. So to me, it kind of brings this thing that I deeply know and wrestle with, like, down to this very fine point about right now. And that it's this individualism is a total illusion. And that definitely comes out of a sense of privilege and entitlement. That right now, if people sort of hold on to that idea, I think it will crush everyone.
Yeah, I understand. I agree. And especially in the context where you are now, I think what you're saying, I'm really curious how it resonates with people in New York at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who is part of setting up a mutual aid effort in New York for people who are alone and need assistance, which is interesting because the people who set this up are also people who are at risk in other ways.
Yeah.
I do also think, like, mental health as a topic right now cannot be overlooked at all. And my friends who are non-disabled and also are part of the mutual aid work also need to maintain their mental health right now in different ways that they have never had to face as well. I have one friend who is a nurse right now and is not working in conditions that are supportive of them at all.
But who is there then to give this support? Like how it happens?
Right. I mean,
or it's a question because it's now this space is open, and we see that that's the place that we are not ready, or that the system as we know doesn't provide this, or we are not prepared or aware to provide this kind of support and care.
Yeah. I mean, it's very clear in America
Mm-hmm.
that we were not prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of trying to avoid going into the politics of that, because that must be extremely evident to everybody at this point. And
I mean,
you
more
know,
like when you talk
yeah,
about these friends and colleagues, that such as your friend who is a nurse and another
yeah,
that you were speaking also.
yeah,
I'm more really I'm wondering what then happens with these concrete individuals when they need this also support.
right,
You know, like
I
that's what
mean,
I mean. Like
yeah,
uh, what is there, and if it is not there, that's what I mean. Maybe it shows us that this is exactly what we are not ready, or we are not prepared, because there is something that also didn't prepare us before we experience this more extreme or crisis situation. I didn't think
yeah,
in like
yeah,
this
yeah,
level of politics that you say is probably evident through people who have access to news and follow what is happening. But I mean more like really in this concrete case, uh, what happens, for example, with this nurse who
right,
is in need of that support, and what happens then.
right. I mean, I think that this is just the nexus of learning right now,
Mm-hmm.
of learning what we didn't know
Mm-hmm.
and couldn't foresee at all. This is a new time, you know. I mean, it could be, even if even if my friend who's a nurse had adequate um, preparation in terms of uh, masks and right gear
Mm-hmm.
and things like this, they might not have been prepared for the emotional or mental toll
Mm-hmm.
taking care of so many people without knowing what will happen would take on them, you know.
Then there is no one to take care exactly uh, about how this nurse uh, can also get this kind of support and care in order to be able to continue with the extraordinary work and efforts that they are already making.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer for that now, because we just communicate via text, and I'm just there for them to
Mm.
tell me when they're really upset or
Mm.
struggling in what they're doing.
Mm.
Um,
It's
but for
important
this,
to
for
actually,
my, go ahead.
I mean, that's why I was listening to you, and then I think maybe it's a question and insight that we are now getting more aware. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's not about. I don't think there is one answer or at all. Maybe answer in this moment at all.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm.
I wanted to say, for this friend who was organizing mutual aid, it's interesting how the different forms of support that they asked for were so creative and different, you know, because they like need a creative outlet when they're not doing that work, in order to sort of relax or
Mm-hmm.
feel okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this is a friend who's a lawyer, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's opened up this aspect of need in their life that I don't think they knew they had until now, and that I actually can help them with now.
Yeah.
So that's created an interesting space. But I mean, I'm saying that sounds nice, but actually their need to come to a place of knowing what they need is not pretty and is very, very difficult and scary.
Yeah.
And I think that is what we're all witnessing in each other right now. And
Yeah.
so some of that needs to be chaotic and messy in order to figure it out. Structurally, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
But emotionally and mentally, I think undergoing an entire transformation around a concept of self right now is happening or going to happen.
I think that's very important what you just said in relation to the concept of self.
Tell me when you actually had said what you meant was just that it's an open question about how to take care of people and how to take care of people who themselves are workers. How do you feel about that as a curator? I mean, you and I have talked about that because you have said that you have this awareness of care because you're also an artist. How do you see those two roles you play in your life and how they inform the way you care?
Well, probably I can be perceived as a curator because of some things that I do and that I try to make, but I don't think or nor call myself like that. Like, beside being an artist, I also work and I see myself more as a cultural worker. And then there, for me, it is important what kind of culture I am contributing to. And for sure, culture of solidarity is something that I work for and live. And I try to learn and experiencing it with others how to do it. So in that sense, that's how I see it. And in this period, I am thinking exactly because this series of talks, I also propose to some of the institutions that I know and that I work with, who are institutions who are one of the also main actors in the contemporary independent performing arts scene. And for me, it's great that they joined, like, to also give more visibility and also help us make this possible. But for me, the more question that is there, and to think what comes after exactly this, what you are describing, of this process of looking for the ways to see how do we continue, is also to think how can we create this space to also accommodate this experience and support further reflection, but not as a topic and content that we squeeze in the old forms of presenting artistic concerns, problems, discussions, and so on, but really to insist that this must not be processed as a content, but that we try to bring this experience that we all have, and as you said, like not to generalize it, but to really understand specificity of each one, or each also local context, or the micro context around a certain institution, or the local scene, or like to understand this, and to really try to do something also structurally, like what is it, how we present the work, how do we invite artists, how do we host them, how do we even think why we should and what kind of artistic work should be created, and under which conditions, and how these conditions are exactly coming from this place that you were describing of care, of understanding the interdependence, solidarity, vulnerability, and how this will not be a place that we would not want to deal with, because it will not sell tickets, or it will not make support this idea of sustainability on different levels, and so on and so on. So for me, this is what is extremely important. In this period of this crisis that we are experiencing, of course, this becomes more in focus, or in my head, and it gets more shaped, how to say, but these are not new ideas for me, like more than last 20 years working in this field. These are my how to say, like, this is what makes me do this work. So that's for me where I see what I would insist on, even if it is going to be small scale, but that's not to be discouraged. And I would insist then in communication with others, and that's how I see it.
That's beautifully said. I mean, I think I've really appreciated getting to know you in this remote way that seems to be our fate still, is because we both want to create change, and that's what motivates us in making.
Yes.
Yeah. So we need to see what's happening now as part of that change somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah. With all of the difficult situations and emotions that it brings up.
Mm-hmm.
And then to pay attention to the other things that it brings up that we maybe never truly have looked at, or the voices that haven't fully been listened to that now need to be.
Exactly. Well, you know that with each artist that I talk, I ask them about the question for the next one. And this, what now it brings me to the question that Miad, Leila, and Hamid Reza had last time, and it means for you. I think a lot of things that we said is pretty much answering their question, but I would like to bring this question not because of any like formal reasons, how to say, to just bring the question because that's the idea, but actually because exactly this different contexts and conditions that we have for our work. Because this, what we were just talking and what I was answering refers to this so-called international contemporary dance scene. And I'm also very critical about these terms and the whole name, but that's another topic. But for our colleagues, Miad, Leila, and Hamid Reza, who live and work in Tehran, in Iran, their context is very different. And this question that they have comes really out of need to understand and also learn from other colleagues in other contexts. How do they manage this situation as artists in terms of how do they and do they continue with their artistic practice, and if yes, in which way they make it possible for themselves, with others, or with the community that they belong to, because three of them, they are part of Arce group, and they work with artists with and without learning disabilities. So they work as a group, but now, of course, they are not as everyone, they cannot meet and so on. So if you can maybe answer also to this, because I'm sure they would like to also hear this, although I said probably many things that we said also refer to this. How do we do it and how do we deal with this situation now?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me, again, in this relationship with you, because I do feel like I've traveled so much through these questions just in this past month, from the time of us initially speaking before this month to now, and like all of the emotions I've experienced, because my whole world fell apart in a certain way as a performer, you know, because, and also as a teacher who teaches studio classes, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, recently I feel like the question of embodiment has come up with a lot of dancers, and how to be able to teach and continue a practice, even if it needs to be through video, that is embodied. So for me, in terms of sustainability, that's something I'm trying to figure out right now, is how to offer that. At the same time, I feel like this is a powerful moment for people who have mobility issues, such as myself, because there's a lot that we can do and we don't have to travel in order to do it. And that in many ways is amazing. To be able to talk with you or to give a lecture and do things with people in this other way. Yes, and I also feel like there's something powerful opening up in terms of what we can all let each other in on about ourselves and our vulnerabilities and what we're trying to work out right now in our lives or something, because we have to look so much at ourselves and whatever parts of ourselves we've been neglecting is it's going to come up now. So how much of that are we willing to share with each other? For instance, in the place where I live now, there are 3 of us. And we have definitely shown each other, opened up to each other aspects of our lives that we have been wanting to work on for a long time that we never have, and now we are. And then that becomes ways that we're offering to each other. So those things become offerings. And then it's sort of like, instead of carrying around a sense of shame about these things, now we're just opening up about them and sharing them and helping each other to work through them together.
I understand.
Yeah. So if you would have told me 2 months ago that this was going to be how it is, I would have been like, no way, my identity is based on these things I do.
Yeah.
But now there's a different way that's occurring in my life, and I am trying in many ways to invite it now and allow certain things to fall away, even though those things are scary. Because even my reasons for making and being an artist aren't completely reliant on those things. So it's like maybe now my practice will become something else, and the way that I interface with the world will shift. But it doesn't mean I stop being the kind of artist that I am at all. Yeah,
I understand. You know what? It is really inspiring to talk again, and I'm just thinking now that maybe we can slowly finish this conversation, and I would like to ask you for a question for the next person that I would talk to. What would it be?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. What I would ask, and I have the weirdest thing to ask the next person.
What is it?
Well, it's a series of questions. One is, what is your guilty pleasure right now? If you want to share it. And then the next one is, do you think that we could start a revolution through our guilty pleasures?
Okay. Great.
And then, like, what would that look like if we could?
Yeah. Okay, great. I like it. Great. Well, Perel, thank you. Thank you for this talk.
Thank you.
And I would then slowly now finish this, and also thank everyone who were watching and listening to us. And
thank you, everyone.
Yes, and we keep in touch. Take care.
Yes, and thank you so much. It's great to see you here.
Please, welcome and thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao.
Ciao.